Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Nana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pavikacharya Satara Sadashi Shrimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikashri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Jai Radha Krishna Gopa Gopanath Shaya Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Gauranga Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Kartik Vrata Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Namo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Namo Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 21, Text number 9. This is the gopis are praising the flute song of Krishna. Gopya kim achararayam kushalam smavenor. Damodara sudam api gopikanam. Bunkt te swayam tada vishishtas rasam radino. Radinyo. Risyat twacho shru mumukush taravo yatarya. Gopya kim achararayam kushalam smavenor. Dam odara darasudam api gopikanam. Bunkt te swayam yad avashishta rasam radinyo. Rishyat twacho shru mumukush taravo yatarya. Gopya kim achararayam kushalam smavenur. Damodara sudamapi gopi. Damodara sudam api gopikanam. Punkte swayam yad avashishta rasam radinyo. Rishyat twacho shru mumutush taravo yatarya. Gopyakim achararayam kushalam smavenur. Damodara daram sudam api gopikanam. Punkte swayam yad avashishya rasam radanyo. Rishyat twacho shrumumutrus taravo yatarya. Anybody? Gopya kimachararayam kushalam smavenor. Namodara daradam apiganam. Punkte swayam radishishyatinyo. Vishyat Tvachoshu Mumuchush Taravo Yatarya. Gopa Kimacharayam Kushalam Smavenur. Damodara Darasudam Api Gopikanam. Bhungte Swayam Yadavashishta Rasam Radinyo. Vishyat Tvachoshu Mumuchushtaravo Yatarya. This is the Brahma Samhita meter, and as it sort of the verse chants itself a little bit when you can get into the meter. Gopya, O gopis, kim, what? Acharat, performed. Ayam, this. Kushalam, auspicious activities. Sma, certainly. Venahu, the flute. Damodara, of Krishna. Adara Sudham, the nectar of the lips. Api, even. Gopikanam, which is owed to the gopis. Bhungte, enjoys. Swayam, independently. Yat, from which. Avashishta, remaining. Rasam, the taste only. Radinyaha, the rivers. Rishyat, feeling jubilant. Tvachaha, whose bodies. Ashru, tears. Mumuchahu, shed. Taravaha, the trees. Yata, exactly like. Aryaha, old forefathers. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada's disciples. My dear gopis, what auspicious activities must the flute have performed to enjoy the nectar of Krishna's lips independently and leave only a taste for us gopis, for whom the nectar is actually meant. The forefathers of the flute, the bamboo trees, shed tears of pleasure. His mother, the river, on whose banks the bamboo was born, feels jubilation, and therefore her blooming lotus flowers are standing like hair on her body. Please repeat. My dear gopis, what auspicious activities must the flute have performed to enjoy the nectar of Krishna's lips independently and leave only a taste for us gopis, for whom that nectar is actually meant. The forefathers of the flute, the bamboo trees, shed tears of pleasure. His mother, the river, on whose banks the bamboo was born, feels jubilation, and therefore her blooming lotus flowers are standing like hair on her body. Purport. This translation is quoted from Srila Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita, Ancha 16:140. In the guise of releasing flowing sap, the bamboo trees are actually crying tears of ecstasy upon seeing their child become an exalted devotee flute of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Sanatana Goswami gives an alternative explanation. The trees are crying because they are unhappy at not being able to play with Krishna themselves. One may object that the trees in Vrindavan should not lament for that which is impossible for them to obtain, just as a beggar certainly does not lament because he is forbidden to meet the king. But the trees are actually just like intelligent persons who suffer when they cannot obtain the goal of life. Thus the trees are crying because they cannot get the nectar of Krishna's lips. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananganan Shalakaya Chakshu Umyektangenat Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Smayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Spavadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Badaya Krishna Pasdaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminithanamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bacharani Nirvasesa Shunyavani Pashadeshwani Vanchakalpa Turubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyebhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Everybody in the spiritual world is conscious. Every body in the spiritual world is conscious. There is no unconsciousness. The trees can think. The bamboo flute is in ecstasy. The gopis are envious of the bamboo flute and speak of the bamboo flute as a person. Krishna relates to the rivers as persons. Everybody is ecstatically aware of their relationship with Krishna eternally. In this contrast to the world we live in, where everything is dead. Actually, in this room, everything you see is really dead matter. I mean, even including our bodies. Take the soul out of the bodies, and you have dead matter. The chair is dead. I can't talk to the chair. The harmonium is dead. We can't talk to the harmonium. Little children, they sometimes play and put animation into things, and we think, ha ha, how funny. Because the children are playing with maybe some remembrance that everything is alive somewhere, but not here. So in this world of matter, we've become so conditioned that we think this is normal. And we don't really understand how the spiritual world is the normal, and we're in the dead world of matter, the prison house. For those who've turned away from Krishna, who don't want to see Krishna everywhere, want to think, maybe Krishna can just ignore me when I do this nonsense for myself. So, how wonderful it is that we have a chance to read the Srimad Bhagavatam and hear the purports and the commentaries of the great acharyas. And just like here, we have even two different interpretations. First is that the bamboo trees are crying, our son, or it is masculine, even though we'll hear from the gopis in a minute that there's some confusion maybe. How wonderful it is that he is tasting the lips of Krishna. But then the alternative that Sanatana Goswami presents is that maybe they're crying because they're thinking, why didn't we get the chance? And how is it possible that a tree is going to cry about this? Well, because in the spiritual world, the trees can actually emote like this and think like this. And it says that the beggar wouldn't be upset about not being able to see the king, but maybe some beggars are upset that they can't see the king, and so therefore these trees are upset that they aren't able to taste Krishna's lotus lips. But even being upset in the spiritual world is an ecstasy. So let's read from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Tika about this verse. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur speaks wonderfully because he always finds the dialogue that's really going on. This flute has created a problem for us, causing us an ocean of disgrace. that is expressed in this verse. What piety, kushalam, did this flute perform? Though the words Vamsi and Murali are in feminine gender, the word Venu is the masculine, like the word Dara, a masculine word meaning wife. What a masculine word. See, the genders get Sanskrit, like so many languages, everything's, all words have come in genders. In English, we don't really think about this because it's pretty genderless, or it's less gender involved. But if you speak Spanish, Italian, Latin, Sanskrit, everything has a gender. So here it says the masculine is being used for the term wife, which is obviously not normally used. What piety did it, the flute, perform to be Krishna's wife? None, because it took birth as a non-moving creature, a low birth from performing no pious acts. But yet the flute drinks the nectar from Damodar's lips. Can that be tolerated? No. Because it should be the gopis' right to taste the nectar, that nectar, gopikanam. Krishna was born as a gopa, and we are born as gopis. Therefore, we have a right to taste those lips, not the flute. Furthermore, the flute has the audacity to manifest a male form and still enjoy bhukti. Furthermore, this statement is done in unmarried state, utterly alone, and by thievery. The flute announces it to the real owners of the treasure, ourselves, by blowing air. But this is not just regular blowing air. It is the sound of enjoyment. It is the sound of the enjoyment the flute gets by the association of Krishna, and we must keep hearing that sound so much the flute enjoys that it leaves nothing left, not even a morsel. What piety did not even a morsel. Though we are the rightful claimants of that lip nectar, the flute leaves nothing for us, not even remnants. Such is his audacity. The rivers are female friends of the flute, and the trees are male friends or messengers. The flute, rivers, and trees are all our enemies. This is an ecstasy. Therefore, where should we hide the flute so that it does not get the nectar of Krishna's lips? Okay, flute, you're in trouble. This sanchari bhav of envy, this is sanchari bhav of envy manifested in the gopis. It's also called vyabhichari bhav, which are fleeting emotions of ecstasy. We're not going to get into the study of the bhavas, but this is the point, that they have these ecstasy of being envious, and it's just flowing through them. And now they're going to have an adventure. Can we get that flute? Because that flute is just getting too much nectar. And it's the nectar we are supposed to have, not that flute. It's not even a gopi. So that's an adventure that happens in many pastimes, where the gopis are trying to hide or steal Krishna's flute. And it is a cause of unlimited, transcendental, eternal ecstasy. Now, to those who aren't devotees, to those who are studying these things in a sort of dispassionate, separate way, this is like, interesting poetry, a sort of metaphor for something else, an imaginative ecstasy of some great personality, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sanatana Goswami, or whatever. It doesn't seem, it may be wonderful, but it isn't the absolute, because they don't have real knowledge, and they haven't got it from a source, or have surrendered to a source of real knowledge. So we need to look at what this In other words, behind the Leela there is what's called tattva. Behind the wonderful stories of Krishna, there is the undergirding absolute truth, the understanding of who Krishna is and who we are and what our relationship with him is and what the spiritual world is and all these underpinnings. Behind your computer screen, there's a computer program and software and hardware, and it is all a bunch of zeros and ones, and who knows really what's going on except a computer scientist. But for me, I play with the computer and I have a whole program and I'm doing whatever I want to do, and I'm not much worried what's behind it. But in Krishna consciousness, we do need to know what's behind it, otherwise we may misunderstand it. Therefore, by the grace of my Gurudev, or our Param Gurudev for most of you, Srila Prabhupada, we have his writings and his teachings, and one of the most important places he teaches is in his Krishna book. And in his Krishna book, everything that we're studying here, we're reading about here, is included. But Prabhupada wrote the Krishna book at a very early state of our movement. It was like the 68, 69. He'd been in the USA for like 3 or 4 years, and there were no devotees a big devotee was like in the movement for 3 years. Now, over the years, many of us have grown old in Krishna consciousness, and we've been here for a long time. But the fact is that still this newness to Krishna consciousness is ever going on. We have new devotees all the time, and even old devotees like myself. We're not so very old, but we need to hear the absolute truth. So Prabhupada slips in a paragraph in this section of the Gopis attracted by the flute, which provides a springboard for understanding the tattva behind this story. It's very important, and Prabhupada always includes this in his Krishna book. So when we read Krishna book, we're getting really the complete story, Leela and tattva. So Prabhupada writes, persons who are constantly engaged in the transcendental meditation of seeing Krishna internally and externally by thinking of him playing the flute, entering the Vrindavan forest, and tending the cows with the cowherd boys, have really attained the perfection of samadhi. Samadhi trance means absorption of all the activities of the senses in a particular object. And the gopis indicate that the pastimes of Krishna are the perfection of all meditation and samadhi. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that anyone who is always absorbed in the thought of Krishna is the topmost of all yogis. Interesting how Prabhupada brings us to a real point of understanding here. That samadhi, this is the perfection of samadhi. Samadhi is a word that people throw around. We have a band named Samadhi. That's fine. And people will say, I'm in samadhi. Well, really, it's like calling the guy on TV who talks about politics a pundit. They're not really pundits. Or the guy who sells you stocks as a financial guru. He's not a guru. We like to borrow words and we appropriate them and we misuse them. It's okay. But samadhi really specifically says something. And the highest samadhi here is given as, what is samadhi? That is absorption of all activities in the senses in one particular object. For the gopis, it's absorption in Krishna eternally. This is real samadhi. And then Prabhupada brings us to a verse. He alludes to the verse, doesn't exactly translate it. Who knows what that verse is? It says, it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that anyone who is always absorbed in thought of Krishna is the topmost of all yogis. What verse does this refer to? Yoginam api sarvesham yad gatena praatama Shravam bhajate yomam sa ye yuktatamo mataha. That is the last verse of the 6th chapter, 647. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Yoginam api sarvesham. That's the highest of all types of yogis. And what does Prabhupada say in the purport? It's a very long purport, but I'm just going to read one little section of that purport. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in bhakti yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of bhakti in bhakti yoga. Yoga actually means bhakti yoga. All other yogas are progressions towards the destination of bhakti yoga. From the beginning of karma yoga to the end of bhakti yoga is a long way to self-realization, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing, because we have a long way to go practicing something that is of great taste and ecstasy. Other types of yoga may not be so great taste and ecstasy, and as actually described, the other types of yoga are more or less impossible to perform. After all, the 6th chapter ends with this verse, and a few verses before, Arjuna tells Krishna, don't ask me to do this other type of yoga, Gyan yoga, because I can't do it, and he's more qualified than us. Krishna says you can do it, but by proper practice and detachment. That practice is Krishna consciousness, and the detachment we get in Krishna consciousness comes from becoming attached to Krishna. We become attached to Krishna in so many ways. Taking prasadam, hearing and chanting with the devotees, kirtan, seeing the deities, engaging in shravanam kirtanam, hearing and chanting Vishnu Smarana, remembering Krishna. Now, let's talk about the yoga ladder, the process of yoga, because it ends in samadhi. And therefore, we have to understand we're practicing yoga. There's a difference between religion and yoga. Yoga means, they both mean the same thing. Actually, religiare means, it's Latin for linking, and yoga is Sanskrit for linking. However, when we think of religion, we usually think of just sorts of rituals and activities done in a social sense of a way. Like was standing in line at the Apple store the other couple of weeks ago, and a bunch of people were right behind us, all dressed up. And they were talking about, I missed church today because I had to come here and wait in line for get my computer fixed. Because, of all the social distancing, you had to wait hours just to get in. And they were going to church. Very nice. But church is like once a week. You go for an hour, you hear a sermon, and then pretty much that's not much else to do the rest of the time. Because the rest of the time they were talking about things like, I wish the football season was better because now there's no people in the stands and I can't hear, it's like, so it's not so much an activity of life. It's nice. But yoga means it's a whole platform of what we do and with our whole life. So every system of yoga follows a certain pattern, and actually Patanjali gave the kind of the framework for this. And we can use this Patanjali yoga's terms in this case because it applies to us too, as we'll see. So, according to Patanjali, there are different stages we need to go through on the way to samadhi, which is absorption in a single point, in a single concentration. And of course, for us, it's concentrating on Radha Krishna, on serving Supreme Lord in Vrindavan. For an impersonalist, it may be just concentrating on Om or something else, but not this. So what are the different stages? Yam, Niyam, Asana, I'll give the English, Pranayam, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and then Samadhi. It's a long way. So we got Yam and Niyam, observances and absences, do's and don'ts. Do's and don'ts for the devotees. What are they? Do what and don't do what. Always remember Krishna and never forget him. Okay, there's our yam and niyam in our practice of yoga. Now, they've got something else to do. There may be a lot of different things they do. Then, asana, pranayam, and pratyahara. That's postures, breathing control, and withdrawal of the senses. Well, Prabhupada said, sit properly. So we have to sit properly while we do our pranayam, which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, which helps us withdraw our senses. Don't look at the phone while you chant. And that leads to determination, utsahan, nishayat, daryat, determination, enthusiasm, and patience. In other words, we have to work hard. We should be determined to work hard, and we should be patient because it's going to take some time. That leads to meditation. As we chant Hare Krishna, as we chant our rounds, or we get into an ecstatic kirtan, we may experience moments when we're really in bliss. And we're actually on a level of meditation. When the astronauts train to go to outer space, here's a tidbit of useless information, but maybe we can put it into Krishna conscious terms. How do you think they get used to weightlessness? Well, there's a way to do it on the planet. They take airplane, and I never want to do this. They get into an airplane, and they take all the seats out and everything, and they put pads on all the walls. And they take the airplane, and they fly it straight up, and then they fly it straight down. And in the moment of going straight down for about 90 seconds, everybody's weightless. And they're bouncing around off the walls. So that's the sort of momentary practice they get in that weightless state for a moment. Then they're back on Earth. So for a moment we may be up, but then we're back on Earth. But that's okay. We get these states of meditation on the name. And as they get longer and longer and longer, and the other things are shorter and shorter, we become more and more blissful and happy in Krishna consciousness. And we have less of the, oh my God, this problem, that problem. Well, we have those problems. If you don't pay your bills, you're going to have no gas or electricity or whatever. Got to do that. But that's not important. What's important is our relationship with Krishna and absorbing ourselves in hearing and chanting about Him. Now, there is a process of Krishna consciousness going through these practices, and it is stated by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and quoted by our dear Srila Prabhupada as part of the purport to the 8th verse of the Nectar of Instruction, which is also called the Upadesh Amrita, and it is an essentially central book. We can read it over and over and over again. Here are the stages from Yam to Samadhi for us, given by Srila Prabhupada's Gurudev. And if we follow it, we'll be totally blissful following it. The journey is enjoyable as long as we're going with devotees and helping each other. In the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. This is called Shravana Dasha, the stage of hearing. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of His transcendental form, qualities, and pastimes, one can attain to the stage of acceptance called Varna Dasha. When one attains this stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of Smarnavashta, the stage of remembering. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and trance are the 5 items of progressive Krishna Smarna. So recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and trance. This is progressive Krishna Smarna, remembrance. At first, here's the points we get here. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals. Hopefully, maybe long intervals at first, but less and less intervals. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted by intervals, but later remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentrated and is called meditation. Here we are, the second to last stage here. When meditation expands and becomes constant, it is called anusmriti. By uninterrupted and unceasing anusmriti, one enters the stage of samadhi or spiritual trance. After smarana dasha or samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position. That's who we really are. I'm not we say, Gopi Bhartu Kamalaya or Das, that we're really servants of the servants of the servants of the servants of the gopis. We're not fill in the blank. Man, woman, cat, dog, Russian, American, all these things, they're all designations. So, after smarana dasa, or samadhi is fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position, or her original constitutional position. At that time, he can perfectly and clearly understand his eternal relationship with Krishna. That is called sampati dasha, the perfection of life. Simple, but it takes a little effort, and therefore we have to help each other. It's really important. Krishna consciousness is not the yoga of going into a cave and burning fires around ourselves, or immersing ourselves in water, or being alone and just focusing. And we see one example, Bharat Maharaj, who did that, and he got in trouble because he didn't have somebody to help. This is the yoga of association. This is the yoga where we help each other advance in Krishna consciousness. And how is that? By reminding each other about Krishna and his qualities, forms, pastimes. By reminding each other about the spiritual master and how the spiritual master is so merciful that the spiritual master has enabled us to engage in the process of Krishna consciousness. By helping one another redirect ourselves when we become disturbed. By never criticizing one another. Actually, there's 3 C's. Never criticize, never complain, and always chant. The 3 C's. Because when we complain, what are we complaining about? Probably going to offend devotees. This guy did that, she did that, all right? And if we criticize, it's the same. But if we always chant, and we see what is wonderful about these devotees that I'm with. They're wonderful because they remind me of Krishna. When you go into a store, the clerk at the store isn't going to remind you of Krishna. Sometimes they do. Oh, I see your neck beads. Are you a Hare Krishna? That's okay. Because we remind them of Krishna. But most of the time, no. But when we're together, in association, engaging in the process, then we're helping each other. And that's what Prabhupada wanted. And we can engage and expand expand this movement and engage as many people as we can through Harinam, book distribution, prasadam distribution, preaching on Zoom, whatever it is. It's really a wonderful thing. We're very fortunate. And we should give our fortune to others by giving Krishna consciousness to others. And read the books. Associate with those who read the books. And let's take advantage of this wonderful month of Kartik to chant the Damodar Astika prayers every day, focus ourselves in more focused Krishna consciousness, and this way fulfill Prabhupada's desire of giving Krishna consciousness to everyone. Hare Krishna. It's not anything except Prabhupada right here. It's really right here. Yes. Find your group, read a book. Our Friday group, which we used to meet in person, been meeting on Zoom. And it's just really ecstasy because we get together and read Bhagavad Gita, and it's like, whoa, it's great. So get a group, read, associate, And it all opens up. Krishna will give us all his mercy. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.